We're really excited to have Matthew here today. He is the education lead at WeWeb. We have a really cool demo here planned for you today. We're going to be building a complete booking management platform with a Xano backend, WeWeb front end. We're going to look at some of the new AI features for design. We're going to get a demo of the product. We're going to look at the product management and the setup side, including things like Figma and importing Figma. So really a lot of cool things that we're going to cover through today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you again, Matthew, for doing this. And I hope you enjoy the webinar.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I'm looking forward to this one. I think seeing everything from scratch is going to be quite cool. So that's what we're going to be doing, as Art alluded to. So we're going to be using Xano and WeWeb. The Xano side will be a bit of a boilerplate. So I have some things ready, but on the WeWeb side, it will be from complete scratch. And again, as Art mentioned, we'll be using the AI here and there, but not for everything, because I think it's nice to have that kind of mismatch between. And that's really why we're working with the AI in the first place, is so we can have a bit of manual intervention. So without further ado, I shall share my screen. And before we jump straight in, I thought it'd be good to basically go through something slightly visual. So just as a double check, I'll give the usual. Can you see my screen?
Yep, all good. We can see it.
Super. So the premise of this is going to be a client booking platform. So there'll be public pages where anyone could go onto. They could book an appointment for your salon, barber, whatever it might be. And then there'll be an admin dashboard where you can view these bookings in a data grid and then in a calendar and different things of that nature. So I've got a demo project set up. This is one I built beforehand, but as I say, we'll switch over to the WeWeb side shortly and start from scratch. So on the project, this is the public page where anyone could land on and book something. So we can have some services here. I've got some demo ones. We could have a date. So you choose your date, your time, put in a name like so, some test information. And then when I book, I get brought to some kind of confirmation page, and this would all be public, so anyone could access it. However, on the other side, we'll have a dashboard for admins. So I could log in like so. And on this dashboard, I can see all the bookings. So which date did I choose? I chose March the 12th. And so on my dashboard here, I can now see there's a booking for March the 12th. And then likewise, if I want a more data way of viewing it, we have a data grid for bookings and a data grid for all of our clients. So I shall switch over to the Figma side, and I'll explain why. So before we jump straight in, WeWeb does many things, as we'll go through in a second. And one of the things we're going to showcase today is the AI side, as well as the manual intervention side, and how you can use it as a builder. Because it's good at design for now, we are working on implementing kind of a full stack experience like Lovable, Bolt, and the others. It's coming, but it's not perfect. And so for that reason, I'm just going to use it for the designs today. And it works really well when you kind of scope out your work. So for those who aren't familiar with kind of separating the front end and the back end, WeWeb is a front end builder and Xano is the back end builder that we'll be using. And before you jump into the full build, it's good to kind of think things through before you jump in. So by that, I mean, yes, you might have a front end, and you might have a client portal, but what does that mean on the back end? You're going to need certain tables to store certain pieces of data. You're going to need API endpoints so you can retrieve certain pieces of data and interact with your back end. And it's good to think these things through before you jump straight in. So as an example, how I kind of like to approach this and how I've approached this build in particular is step one, it was simply a case of what features are needed. Now, this is an exact replica of kind of what was shared on socials before this. So features were going to be allow clients to book, track key stats, easily manage client appointments, etc. And another key part of when you're kind of encompassing web applications and thinking them through is what roles do I need? Now, in our case, unauthorized users, aka the public pages, the non-signed in users, they can only book appointments, which is what we saw in the first place on that booking portal. So that's the premise of the features and the role restrictions. And what that enabled me to do is actually to utilize AI. So everything is AI these days, and it's fantastic for this kind of thing. We are trying to think a project through. So this allowed me to build a prompt of, I want to build an automated booking system app that can do these things, and these are my features. And then I mentioned something around the role restrictions. So clients don't need to be logged in to access the booking portal. And then I simply asked, what pages do I need, and what would be the database schema? So, and you could pass this prompt into anything. You could pass it into GPT, Claude, whatever you like. You even pass it into the WeWeb AI, which we'll see in a second. And this just gives you a breakdown. This is quite complex, but the pages, The database schema, flow summary, it's all well and good. We don't really need all of it. And even the schema, it will probably give you like this. If you aren't familiar with databases, can be a bit jarring. It's a bit, what's going on. If you do go down this route, just quickly, something you can ask it for is the DBML, which is kind of just a restructuring of this and gives it to you in a different way, which will look something like this. And even this might be a bit like what's going on if you aren't familiar with databases. But what this does allow you to do is you can put DBML into different platforms. Like here, there's a site called DB Diagram, and you could put the DBML onto the left-hand side here, and it visualizes the tables in a very nice way. So it's a good way to approach things, get the AI to tell you exactly what you need in terms of tables, get it to output it in a certain way, which, is just friendly to look at and visualize nicely. And so this will actually be the makeup of our Xano backend, which we'll see in a second. I've recreated this, so it's ready to go. And if I switch back to the Figma, once I had the tables that I needed, the next step was, okay, what would the needed endpoints be? And just to reiterate, if you aren't familiar with endpoints, it basically means, okay, I have data in my database, in my backend. I need to interact with it in some way. So I need to get a certain piece of records from a table. I need to get records and manipulate them. What kind of backend functionality, aka endpoints, do I need in order to make this whole client booking portal to work? And again, just another prompt. It could be GPT, could be Claude, could be the WeWeb AI, whatever you like. It'll all work very much the same way. You'll get a long spiel. Again, if this is your first kind of foyer into web applications, this will be a bit technical, like what's going on. But you only really need a few to get the core working, which you'll see in a second. So this is a good breakdown, a good place to start from. So I've kind of structured all of this, taken what I really need, and at the very bottom, I've broken down into what I actually need. So the tables, this is what we saw just a second ago. This is what we will use. I've tried to structure it in a slightly nicer way. APIs, you could see in what we got back here, there's a ton of different APIs. We do not need all of this. If we want to go the full length, we could, but we don't need to today. So I've just taken a few out for the core functionalities, like we will need a login endpoint for the admins to access. Bookings, we need to get the booking records. We need to create a new booking, which is what the post term means when we went through the booking platform, or the booking portal, and who created a booking. We'll need to utilize this and different things, which you'll see in the live app shortly when we go through and build it. And then finally, branding as well, actually. So after this, I just gave another follow-up, give me a catchy name for the app and a color palette. And so it gave me Slotly, which I thought was quite cool. And then a color palette, which I've put into WeWeb so we can utilize in a second. So with the kind of premise covered and the base context of how I've approached all of this, we can jump into WeWeb. So I have my app ready to go here, and this is just a blank WeWeb project. The only thing I have set up beforehand is the colors. So as you just saw, I asked the AI for branding. In the library of my project, I've set up some colors here, which is exactly the same as it gave here. And that's so the AI can use it, as we'll see in a second. And just to show you quickly as well, on the Xano side, for those databases, what we got in our prompts before, the suggested tables were these. And so in Xano, I've set up those tables so they're ready to go. And I've got some API endpoints ready to go also. We'll spend more time on the WeWeb side. I'll probably do a bit in Xano just to give people context. But as I say, it's all set ready to go. And the main focus will be the WeWeb side. So finally, switch back over to WeWeb, and the first page we want is actually going to be the booking portal. So the public pages, we'll start with those, and then we'll work our way through and get to the admin dashboard. So, and just quickly, if no one is familiar with WeWeb, if this is your first time seeing it, you'll see we have this AI prompter in the middle per se, and you also have this AI chat on the right. Both do the same. They just allow you to create a page, very much like a lovable and bold experience, but we just aren't full stack yet. So it's great at creating the designs, some of the front end logic, and that's basically what the premise of this is. You can prompt the AI to get it to do things for you. But alongside that, you can also add things to the page manually. So if I wanted here, I can open the add panel. I have a bunch of different elements I can select from. So I could drag a section onto my page, then drag something else into it, like a button. So you can work with it all very much manually, which is what we'll get into today. So without further ado, I shall jump into the first page, which is that public client portal. So I've got some things ready to go here. We need endpoints. I've kind of laid it out in these designs, which I'm going to use. You'll see how I use them in a second. And just for reference later on, I've kind of laid out where we need to get certain pieces of data from the backend. So in this chat interface of WeWeb, where we interact with the AI, I can pass in images as context, very much like if you use Claude or GPT. And so what I can do is in these wireframes I have set up in Figma, I'm going to give it these wireframes so it will build them and use them as a skeleton. And then on the side here, I've just, again, for reference, in the wireframes, which I'll refer back to, I have these so I know where to get data from. So for example, where we have this services select, we'll have a table called services here, where I've got some pre-made things ready. And you would have seen this in the demo, the haircut, shave, VIP, that kind of thing. So we need to set it up so that it pulls the services. Same thing for available slots. This will be, if you choose the 21st of March, which slots during that day are available. We'll use this endpoint to get that information. And then finally, once it's all said and done, we need to post a booking. So I shall take a screenshot of this page. I will paste this into the chat window. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to do this on a new page. So later on, we'll make the home page the dashboard. So I'm going to do this in a new page. I'll call it Booking Portal. We still have the image in the chat. And so here I just have a ready-made prompt that will kind of set the foundations. And so we'll also copy this. And just for context, what I'm asking for here is I want to create a booking form. Bit of information in case it wants to use it for branding. So my app is called Slotly. Give it a bit of context about what it is I'm building. I've mentioned the colors I have in my library. So we saw I created it already in the project: primary, secondary, accent, background, and text. So when it creates the designs, it can bind those colors. So they're very easily changeable in the future, And then again, just some information about what is on the page. So when they are booking, what do I need to take? First name, last name, all these different things. Just some context about what is included in the image, what will be on the page, and what I want it to do. So I shall switch over to WeWeb and I shall paste this in and let the AI do its thing. So it takes a second to load, and then once it begins loading, it will first of all generate the designs on the page. And then alongside that, if there's anything it needs, so here we see it's creating variables, there'll be things it needs to create some kind of front-end logic. So as I said, we won't kind of delve into the logic creation side of it too much. It does it right now, but it's not perfect, and we recognize it's not perfect, which is why I'm not going to focus on it too much for now. But these are kind of the first stages of the logic that we've implemented and how it likes to generate these. So it generates the variables. Here we can see it already knows there's going to be services, which is what we saw in the services select. There's going to be a selected service. So obviously when you select one of those services, it will save it, selected date, and then the available time slots. So you can already see from that wireframe I gave and from the prompt, it already understands somewhat what the logic needed on the page is going to be. And so it's created these variables if we want to use them, which we probably won't. And now it's creating the elements for the page, which it goes through this process. And then once it's done, we shall see those elements.
While this is loading, I have a question. Is Xano probably the most popular backend that people are using with WeWeb? And also, what other backends would be available with WeWeb?
It's a great question. So I think Xano is definitely the most popular from a no-coder's perspective. So I haven't delved into it too much, but if I go into the backend panel, if you want to use WeWeb AI with kind of the logic generation, it can actually incorporate Supabase as a backend and work with it much like Lovable. It's not at that level yet. We're planning to make it at that level, but it's not there yet. But you can actually use it with Supabase. So from a no-code perspective, I think very much Xano is the most popular backend. But if you're more familiar with code, I think Supabase is very much popular. And as we kind of delve into this route of pushing the AI towards using Supabase and giving a better way for no-coders to interact with Supabase, I think it's very much going to grow. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but I definitely think with the no-coders, Xano is much more popular. I think, so as I said, the AI is kind of temperamental right now. I'm not sure if let me just refresh the page. I might have to try that prompt again, just to have it go through. I will just try this one more time. So we have been doing some releases today. And because I have a WeWeb account, I have access to certain features. So I might be the one causing some problems here. So I'll just put this in again. and hopefully it works through this time. If this doesn't work, there is always the side of us doing it the good old-fashioned manual way, which is no problem. Okay, there we go. So as we see in real time, it generates the elements, which is quite cool, gives that visual feedback. And then as we see, it will start to mirror the wireframes that I gave. So we have our form. It will first have that service select, then the date select, and then the time select. And then after this, we should see the information about the client, which they will then use to input their information, obviously. And I gave it wireframes, but obviously you don't need to give it wireframes. It's nice if you have an understanding of what you want to be on the page, that you can break it down in a skeleton or a drawing, whatever you like, so that it obviously mirrors much more what you have in your mind for the actual UX of the project. However, you don't necessarily need wireframes. I could have just gave it the prompt and it would have generated a page, probably very similar to this. And so if I now go into the designs, we can see here for the text, for example, it's bound the text color to be of my library. Same with the background color here. It's taken the color from my library, which is good. We can change this easily in the future. And the nice thing now is I can manually go in here and I can change things. So for example, here I can see it's kind of done a funny thing with these inputs, but because it's all within the editor, I can simply just make the manual adjustments. And I think it's put a button here at the bottom, which is here. And then for the background, it's got this one. So I'll just manually change this to primary, like so. Cool. Okay, super. Now we need to set up the actual logic of this. So if I switch back to the Figma, we needed to get services first to populate this. So what I can do is in my plugins, I can add 2 plugins. So the first thing I'll add is Xano for the data source. And I have my metadata API key on a different page. Give me 1 second. And so once we incorporate these Xano plugins into our WeWeb project, it's very easy to access our backend, access the data from our tables, and then also access the endpoints, which we will shortly make. So it just makes life much easier. Otherwise, you would have to manually set up all of the API requests, which can be a massive hassle. So I have the Xano data set up. And the other thing I want is the authentication, which makes handling authentication, again, just much more straightforward. Otherwise, it would be way more manual. So I will select the instances I have in Xano, connect to the workspace, and here we just need to connect a few endpoints. So the get me endpoint is just auth me, login is auth login, and sign up is auth sign up. If you're not familiar with Xano, whenever you actually create your first workspace in Xano, these authentication endpoints here will come pre-made, so you don't have to worry about them. And so whenever you connect the Xano plugin inside of WeWeb, it's just a case of selecting those endpoints. Cool, so that's ready to go. And so now I will want to get the services so we can populate this. So what I can do is I can add a collection. So in data, I have access to collections here. And collections are just a nice way to store data from my backend. So I will call this services. I'll create a folder for it just to manage it and make it easier to find. The source will be Xano, and there's different types of modes you can have. I won't go into details too much, but what we want is dynamic for now, so we can dynamically fetch it each time it's needed. I can go into the API group, which all of these groups, if you're familiar with Xano, they just come from these groups that we have set up. So I can choose services, and I want to get services. And here we can see all of those services. And how these are being pulled is that in this services endpoint, so this one that I'm utilizing, I just have a function in here to query all records from the services table. And if I go to the services table, it just gets all of these records. So that's all that it's returning, as we can see here. So I can continue. And actually, before I do that, I'm going to switch back and I'm going to want to fetch this collection automatically, but not preserve it on navigation. What this basically means is that if I use this collection anywhere on the page, whenever the page loads, it will automatically fetch that collection, which is good because that means now, if I go to this service select, I can in the options here, and the AI, by the way, has already, whenever we created the page, it created some variables for us to use because it assumed what logic we need and it's actually correct. And so it's automatically bound those variables that it created, which is good. But in this case, we're going to override it with our manual data. So I'm going to drag in bind in my collection here. So I can go into the data tab. Here I have access to all my collections and I can bind that data like so. So we have our services. And now I will just change the label of the item. So I want the label to be the name of it. And I want the value, because this is what we will send to the backend whenever we create the booking, is the ID. And so now, whenever I preview this, we can see I have those options pulled in. Fantastic. And because it's set to fetch automatically when we first created the collection, when this page loads, it will automatically fetch this and populate the services. Super. So we have our date. This is, I need to change this slightly because I don't want it to be a range. I want it to be a single. So I'll just go into the date picker. Let's make it date, month, year, auto apply. And now let's see, does it? Super. So we select a single date. And here again, nicely, the AI has pulled in some mock times for us, which is good. And again, the nice thing about WeWeb is if I wanted to actually override this in some way and like pull in some manual selects, I can. So I could put a select on my page. I'm going to get rid of the one the AI gave us. And I can just set it up as I would need to, change some styling for it. And here, this is probably the most complex part of the app. So when I was going through this, I was thinking how to lay this out in a very simple way. And unfortunately, there isn't a very simple way to lay this out, which is good and bad because we'll kind of see how complex you can actually achieve things or how advanced things can get, and you can still achieve it within the context of WeWeb and Xano. But like I say, it's probably the most complex thing. So we can jump into this. So here, to think this through beforehand and to kind of go back to what I did at the start, where I basically spoke to AI and said, okay, I'm building this app. What databases do I need? What endpoints do I need? It's a similar thing here. So I'm not a coder, but I can understand, I can think through the step-by-step process of what I need to do. So what is it I need to do to get the times here? Well, whenever a date is chosen, I need to look through that date, see which bookings already exist. And if a booking does exist, that time shouldn't be available. And so what I can do in that sense is I can actually prompt AI to solve this for me. So because this is quite advanced and that logic is difficult to set up in the context of no code, you can use JavaScript. So that JavaScript will actually be used inside of Xano, which I'll show in a second. But if I wanted to, I can actually also utilize JavaScript inside of WeWeb. There'll be one case where we do this on the dashboard, which we'll get into shortly. But just to give you context now, whenever I click onto the binder here, and the nice thing about WeWeb is you can bind absolutely everything, which gives the flexibility. If I bind something, I can use JavaScript, and this just opens up a world of possibilities. And again, we'll explore this a bit more in the future in a couple of minutes when we get onto the dashboard. So I shall switch over back to Xano. And if I switch to Figma, we can see I had as a reference, we need to get the available slots. And this is kind of what I was talking about in terms of the logic. So if I think this through and I have this set up, but I'll talk through it. The first thing we need to do is get the bookings, because why do we need the bookings? We need to figure out, okay, what bookings are made on this selected day, which is why I have an input here for the date. So again, I won't go too much into Xano, but you can choose input to your endpoints where you can pass certain things. And then based on what is passed as an input, you can use that in that logic. So I have a date set up as an input, which is why whenever we choose a date on the front end, we'll pass that as an input. Here I get the bookings. I just get all of the bookings because we use this in logic. And here I have a Lambda function. Now, again, this is quite complex. There isn't really an easy way to do this, but you can simplify it with AI. So I have this JavaScript here, but quite simply what I did is I asked AI to generate this for me. So if I switch back to my Figma, I have this saved as a prompt of kind of the thought process of it. So all I've done is I actually prompted AI with this. So I could open up ChatGPT, for example. And let's take it there. You know what, actually, let's try this in WeWeb. So what I could do is I'll start a new chat. I could do something like this. And basically here, I've given it data from my bookings table. So if I switch back to Xano, I can go into my booking table and we have that booking that we created. And in this one we're discussing now, the endpoint available slots. Whenever I debug this, and I will choose, I'll pass in a date as an example. Here we go. We can see we have this bookings data. And so all I've done in the prompt is I've taken this bookings data And it's important to take it from an example, because whenever the AI creates logic around it, in this case, JavaScript, whatever it is, it's important that it matches the exact format of the data. So I've just taken that data. I then swapped it out here. So it has an example of the data that I want to give it. And then for the date, I've given it a similar or the exact match of the date that I passed in as an input, like so. And so that's the prompt I exactly used to generate this JavaScript. And when it gave me that JavaScript, all I did was I pasted it into this Lambda function, and I swapped out two things. I swapped out the bookings that it takes in and the date that it takes in. Now, this is kind of one of the advanced features of Xano. You can pass in pieces of data from both the inputs and the function stack. So here I've said $var bookings. This is basically taking in the bookings that I found here. And then input.date is taking in the date that I give as an input. And so to bring this all together, what it basically means is if I run this now actually with the date I gave, you can see I get back here a bunch of available slots. And these are all the available slots. So we can see there's no hours missing. However, if I check the day that I've actually booked one for initially when we were demoing this, there should be a slot missing. So if I go to booking, the appointment date was March the 12th at 10. So if I input March the 12th into this, 10 a.m. should be missing. So if I run it again, we can see 10 is missing. There's only 9 and 11. So that's good. The logic works. It's not returning 10. So this is what we can use to get the available slots on the front end. So in terms of hooking this up, it's as simple as creating another collection. So in my data, I shall create another collection. I will call it available slots. I'll put this in a bookings folder. Again, it's just easier to manage everything. It's in associated folders. Source will be Xano. It will be dynamic again. And the API group will be bookings. And I will get the available slots. Now here, when I've bound a collection like this, as we saw when we were actually in Xano, needed a date as an input. And so here I'm asked to provide some kind of input for the date field. And so what I can do, again, nice thing about WeWeb is I can bind absolutely everything. So if I press this plug, I'm presented with all of the data of my project, and we have access to the date picker that's on the page. And we have at the minute the 21st of March selected. And so if I bind this and I continue, we now get all of that data. So fantastic. And I will, again, not preserve on navigation, but I'll fetch the collection automatically. And one last thing I'll need to do to get this all set up is that whenever this date changes, I need to refetch that collection. Because if I was to now change the date, the 22nd of March, I need to re-get that data so that available slots are updated for whichever date I've chosen. So what I can do is I can add a workflow. Now, again, if you aren't familiar with WeWeb, workflows just allow you to run actions whenever the user does something with the element, whatever it might be. So in the case of the date picker, I can choose a trigger, again, various different triggers, but the one I want is on change. So basically when the user selects a different date. So I can choose on change, and then I will want to refetch the collection. Here we go, fetch collection, and I'll want to fetch available slots. So to bring this all together, I now need to hook up the available slots. So I'll just go to options, bookings, bind it to the available slots like so, just to make sure this works. There we go, we have the slots. And so we can see we have 9, 10, and 11 are available. And if I now choose the day which I booked, which I think was the 14th, the 12th, sorry. If I now choose the 12th, and I think we actually have, it doesn't let us choose a date in the past, which is good. The AI will automatically set that up. But for the example, I'll remove it. So I'll get rid of the min date and choose the 12th. Now in here, there we go. We can see the 10th isn't there, so it's correctly refetched the data. So I'll input all of this. I'll put in some test information and do this. And the last piece we need on this page, I'll choose a service, is we need to actually add the booking. So we need to post the booking, which basically means in the context of endpoints and backends, A get means get the information, and a post means you're adding something. So here, as I referenced, we need to post the booking. And I have, again, this endpoint set up, which I'll switch to now. Basically just means that we are here taking inputs, which are what we need to populate either a booking record and a client record, because in our database, we have this booking table, which has information about the booking, but it also links to a client. And how it does that is there's a client table, like so. So whenever we create a new booking, we need A, information about the booking, so we can add a record to the booking table, and then B, information about the client, so we can add information to the client table if it's applicable. And what do I mean by if it's applicable? So in this endpoint, what it actually does is the first thing I do is I get a record from the client table. And why do I do that? And how do I do that? Well, how I do it is I just check to see if a client already exists with the email that was given. Because if they do exist, we don't want to create a new client. They already exist. And how I then set up the logic around that is I say, if the client is null, add them. If they're not null, don't add them. Basically, it means, hey, check the client table for a record that exists with this email. If it doesn't exist, add them as a client. If they do exist, do nothing, which is what we want. We then generate this UUID. What this basically is a unique identifier. You'll see why that matters in a second. And then we add the record to the booking table, which is just whatever information has been given. So why does this UUID matter? Well, in the context of the public pages for the booking confirmation page, which I will add now, we want this confirmation page to be accessible by someone who isn't signed in. Because if you can create a booking with a public page, you aren't signed in, you then want to actually view the confirmation when you're not signed in. Because that way you can send them a confirmation email, a text, whatever it might be, and they can view the confirmation at any point. But we still need something on the page to know who's accessing it and what data to show, and do it in a secure way. Because if it was just the person's name, like, I don't know, you put in the URL, my name, Matthew, then if I know you're getting the information because you put Matthew in the URL, then maybe Art has booked something, so I could just change it to Art and view his booking. We don't want that. We want it to be somewhat secure, but still public. And so what a UUID is, it allows us to do that, because they're called UUIDs because they're unique identifiers. So here in the booking table, I'm storing a confirmation UUID. Again, it's just a unique identifier, which just allows us in a secure way to access the correct bookings, which I'll show you how that works in a second. So what I'll do here on this booking confirmation page is I will go into the URL path. And in WeWeb, you can add custom paths. If you're familiar with paths, a path in the URL is basically anything that comes after these dashes. So right now, it's a dash, this long string, which actually is also a unique identifier that we use at WeWeb for projects and pages and things like that. And then another dash. So these are two different paths. So we can set up custom paths. So what I can do is I will add a custom path, and I will call this code. And the code that we pass here to the page will be that UUID. So while we're on this page, actually, I'll get the AI to set it up. So I will get rid of this I had and this context, and I'll switch back to the Figma. I don't have a wireframe for this page because the AI can just take the prompt and run with it. So I'll just take this prompt. It's just saying on this page, I want to show confirmation of the booked appointment, and I have attached as context the data available. Why this is important actually is before we jump into building it, I want the data. So I will set up the endpoint first, because similar to how we created JavaScript using the AI earlier, it's always useful to give data to the AI, because then it can create what it needs on the page based on that data. Because if we're showing a booking confirmation on the page, it's extremely useful for the AI to know what data should be on the page, which is why in this case, actually, I'm going to set up the endpoint first so we can get that data. Then whatever data we have, we can give it to the AI, and it can then create a much more basically needed page or one-to-one page with the data that's available. So back in WeWeb, I will go to data. We'll create a new endpoint called bookings public. This will be in the bookings folder. This will also be dynamic. And here, I have this set up already. So in this endpoint, bookings public, all it does is it takes a UUID as an input, which is just text in this case, and then it looks for the matching record. So As I said before, each booking has this UUID. And so all this endpoint does is it looks to get you the booking record for whatever UUID you gave it. So that's all this does. And so I will set this up now. So I will go into the bookings API group. We have this bookings public endpoint. I'm going to leave this blank for now. And so it won't actually, there we go. And so if I go back to the booking portal, I'm going to put in some test information here. And on this form, because it's put it inside of a form, whenever it is submitted, I will want to create a booking. So I'm going to want to use that post booking endpoint that we went through. And here we have all the fields that we need to pass it. So I'm going to quickly bind everything. So the date will be this date. The appointment time will be this time. The notes will be the comments input, service ID, services select, and then first name will be the first name. And then last name will be the last name. Email, phone number. Cool. And then one thing I didn't mention on the bookings endpoint is whenever we create the booking, it returns the UUID that it created for the booking. So what that means is if I now post this, we can see it was successful because it's marked by green. And if I go into the logs, I can see here what was returned. So I can see the data returned was this string, and this is the UUID of the booking that was just created. So what that means is I can navigate to, which means I can now navigate the user to a different page on our project, and I can navigate to the booking confirmation, and I'll pass in that UUID. And so I'll do this now, I'll test it. So we will be taken to the booking confirmation page. And to bring it all together, what that now means is that when I land on this page, I can use this bookings public endpoint to get the booking that aligns with the UUID that's in the path of the page. So on that page before, we created the booking, we got the UUID of the booking that was created, we're sent to this confirmation page, and whenever we were sent to this page, this ID was passed in the URL. That means we can use it and get the booking associated with it. So now if I do this, we can see we have that booking that we just created. Cool, that's all good. So we have that collection set up now. And so, as I said before, now that we have this example data, it is just basically way more likely the AI will create exactly what we need, and it should also bind the data. So I'll just switch back to get that prompt I had before, this page. I will paste it in. And what I can do in this chat window is I can pass in data from my project as context. So if I press this plus icon and I go into the collections, I can go into bookings. I can open up that bookings public collection. And here it will actually pass in the data that's currently available. So here it has this data. And because it can now read the entire format of the data, so it will see, okay, there's a date, there's a time, there's a status. It will create designs that are much more needed essentially for based on the data that's available. So I can send this to the AI and it can work its magic. And the very cool thing about this is that because I passed in that collection as context in the prompt, it's actually already set up the bindings. So here, this is the booking I just made was for the haircut and shave on March the 4th at 10th. And here you can see this is the information I gave in that booking. So it's already, because I passed in the booking data as context, it's already set up all those bindings. So I don't need to touch this, which is cool. Super. So now, just to make sure that all this public stuff is working on the public pages, I can deploy this. And so if anyone hasn't touched WeWeb in a while, we actually recently made publishing free. Before you had to be on a paid plan to publish something, but now you can publish something even on the free plans. So it's fantastic for testing. So this will publish, and we can then just make sure these public pages are working in a live environment. Then once they are, we can quickly run through setting up all of the admin dashboard, which should be pretty straightforward because that's really where the AI shines for these things, because it's just about creating elements and binding data to those elements. And while this is publishing, I'm going to actually set up our bookings endpoint to get the bookings, which we'll use on the dashboard. So I have set up my get bookings. All this does is it literally just retrieves all of the bookings records from the booking table. So in WeWeb, I will create a collection, call it bookings, put it in the bookings folder. It's from Xano. It's going to be dynamic, and it will be in the bookings group, and it is the get booking endpoint. And that's never good. It's because I'm not signed in. Silly me. I need to be, which is actually, it's working as expected, which is a good thing. So to access the bookings, you would need to be signed in. You wouldn't want someone who's not signed in to access the bookings. So we'll need to sign in first. So we'll set that up in a second. But in the meantime, our project is published. So if I go to the live site now, we can see we have our fancy page. And so I have my options to choose from. So I'll choose a VIP. I want an appointment on March the 22nd. I want it to be at 12 o'clock. And my name is John Doe. My email is john@gmail.com. And I want extra VIP. And so when I book this, I'll be taken to the appointment confirmation page where we have all of the information. So super, that's working correctly. And as I said before, because we're passing this UUID, if I go to the very end here, because we're passing this UUID, it means we can basically send this to the client in different ways. We could send it via email, we could send it via SMS, whatever we like. And then whenever they access this page, they could see this information. So for example, if I was to refresh, we still see the same information because it's getting the information directly from the URL from our backend. Okay, super. So now let's go through setting up the admin things quickly. So what I want is a sign-in page. And we want our users to sign in, obviously. And again, we don't really need any kind of wireframes for this because it's something that AI can run with. So here I've just said I need a login page. Again, here's the colors, please use them. And to sign in, I want a user to give their email and password. So on this page, I shall give it that prompt and let it run with it.
While this is running, I have a quick question. I suppose that WeWeb has different UI elements, for different things like signing in. Are you finding that it's more efficient and better to use AI to generate some of these pre-built elements, or use some of the ones that might be in the library?
It's a great question. It kind of, it depends on the person, I think. So what we're finding is that people still like to use the pre-made elements and components because they like to be the hands-on builder. And some people like to just, hey, AI, I don't care how you do it. I just want you to do it. So it's very much a mixed bag, which is interesting, but it's also very cool to see because that's kind of the thought belief that we have, that even with all these AI advancements, you're still going to have people who want to be hands-on. And even if AI generates 50%, they still want to do the other 50% themselves. So it's kind of a mixed bag. And I suppose the nice thing, if you do choose AI over some of our pre-made templates, is it comes pre-built in with logic a lot of the time. So for example, here, the AI is already set up error states. So I presume if I type in Matthew@weweb.io, there we go. It gets rid of the error state. So it already has built in, for something like a form, it has pre-built in validation, which is cool. And if for sometimes, if you're setting up validation on a sign-in form like this, it can actually be quite time consuming for just how much ROI it gives back to your project per se. So yeah, so we have our sign-in page. We take the email and password, and I'll just put in a password here. And just for context before I do that, I already have myself as a user in the user table. So I don't actually need to set myself up. And so if I put in my password here, I will, on the sign-in form itself, I will want a new workflow on submission. And because we added the Xano auth plugin to our project, we have these nice actions available, which makes our lives a lot easier to handle authentication. So I have login, And here I just need to pass in the email input and the password input. And it has access to those inputs that I gave. So now if I test this, because my credentials are correct, I'll be signed in. And we can see here actually in real time that one, in the logs, it's available, but two, if I access the variables here in this debugging menu, at the bottom here, I have access to plugin variables, and this is the Xano data. So we can see here the information of the signed in user, which is now me from the user table. And the last thing I want to do here is I want to navigate the user once they've logged in to the dashboard page, which we put on the home page. Cool. So I'll test this now. So we'll go to a blank page for home, and here we'll create our dashboard. So switch back to my Figma where I have some pre-made things. This is the wireframe I want to use. This calendar that we'll create, it will actually be a custom component, which is another one of the cool features of the AI. I don't know what it will do for this because we kind of need to break it into two. So the first thing I'll do is generate the page. Then once the page is generated, I will be more minute with setting up this data. So going in individually and saying, hey, for this bookings per week, this is how I want you to calculate it. For the revenue, this is how I want you to calculate it. And then finally, I'll generate the calendar component. But since we're doing this in one go, I don't really know how it will handle it, but it'll be cool to see. So I'll go into the AI. I will start a new chat just so it doesn't have any context being passed in that I don't want it to use. And then I will take my prompt, which here, again, kind of just a premise of context, similar to the other prompts I've been giving. So on this page, I want a dashboard page. My app is called Slotly, just so it has a bit of information. It wants to use the branding somewhere. For context, this will be on the app. So on this dashboard page, I want it to create a side navigation, which is why I've mentioned what pages there will be, because it will probably use these pages as items in the side navigation. Just a bit of design instructions. So please make sure there's interactive hover states. Use the colors. And then I've just said again, please make sure you use the skeleton I've given you. So I'll paste that in and I will let it do its thing. And one thing I forgot to mention in my prompt is that I asked it to make the left side nav a multi-page section. So this is kind of one of the nuances of WeWeb where you can have sections on the page. So if I actually open up the layout tree here, I can't access it because it's generating now. But there will be sections on the page, and something you can create is a multi-page section. What that basically means is if you use a multi-page section across pages, then it won't re-render that section on page change. So for something like a sidebar, it makes a lot of sense to make that a multi-page section because you're going to use it across pages. And so that way, whenever you change pages, it doesn't have to constantly re-render it. So that's why I've asked for a multi-page section. Cool. And one thing I forgot to mention before, actually, I mentioned the variables that are created in whenever the AI is generating, but it also creates tasks. So similar to how I've been manually creating workflows, it will actually give you suggestions of workflows to create. And so if I press one of these now, it will actually create that workflow. So it's actually very handy. I'm just not experimenting with it today because I know it's not perfect, which is why I'm just using it for design generations. But as we iterate on it more and more, and as if you were to use this for yourself, it actually does work pretty well in a lot of cases. It's just not perfect, which is why I'm not using it today, but it does do that in its current iteration. So I'll just dismiss this for now. And what I will do here is I'm going to get rid of these charts it gave us because I just want the stat. And so here, I'm going to get creative. Actually, first, let's set up our bookings. So before I had this bookings endpoint, we couldn't get any information, but now that I'm logged in, it should work. Fantastic. There we go. I have that data. Same as before, I'm going to not preserve it on navigation. I want to fetch it automatically. And so here, I'm going to go into the AI. I'm going to bind it here. And so now whenever I use the AI, while I have this formula menu open, I can get it to create formulas, basically. So what I will do is I will open up my collection. And because I want this to be the bookings this week, I will pass in this bookings data. And I will say, I want to have the number of bookings whose appointment date is this calendar week. And so here, it will actually create a formula for that. And because we gave in the data as context, it will return it for however may sit within the data that we gave. So it's returned 1 here, and I'm pretty sure that is actually correct if I quickly go back to the bookings table and I refresh this. So it was based on the appointment date. And yes, there we go. So it's only this one that would appear. And if I was to change this to March the 23rd, and then refresh the bookings information, you can see this now returns 2. So that's working correctly. Super. And then for the revenue this week, I'm going to want to do something similar. So I will say here, I want to show the revenue of all the bookings. Get rid of this in the context so it doesn't accidentally use it. Super, and it's returning, oh yeah, it's perfect. I was about to say it's returning 35, but it's not a currency, but it's already set it up to be a currency, so that's exactly what we need. And how it's pulling this is that because the bookings are related to a service, and each service has a price, it sums those prices. So super. Now, if I, now we want the calendar. So as I said before, we can create custom components. So I have a prompt for this ready. And so we call them custom components in the context of WeWeb, but everything in reality, like all of the elements you have access to on the left-hand side here in the add panel, these are all our custom components. You can go onto our GitHub, you can see the source code for these components. Now, actually, you can even fork these if you wanted. So every single element in the editor, you can click here and you could fork it. So in reality, everything in this add panel is a custom coded component. It's just a custom coded component that we've created for users to use. And so whenever I ask the AI to create a custom coded component, in reality, I'm just asking it to create a brand new element, which is nice because you can use external libraries, things of that nature. And so it's really flexible in terms of what it can create. So here I'm just going to say, I need a custom calendar component to show all of the planned bookings. Here's an example of the data structure I want to give in my list of bookings. And similar to, as I've been doing before, when I wanted to do something that requires a very specific data structure, I just want to give it an example of the data structure that will be used in whatever the context is, in this case, the component. So I'm just going to go into Xano here. And why I'm going into Xano is because I want to get the exact structure of the data that will be used in the component. So since we're using our bookings collection, this is exactly the data that will come from that collection. So I'll put this in here. And I will now get it to create a custom calendar component. And because I've gave it that data in the exact structure, it will set up a component around that structure. So here we go, it will generate this. This will take a bit of time because it has to generate all of the code. So while it does this, I'm just going to set up the last collection that we need, which will be for this clients page. So it will just be another collection. I will create a new folder. And there we will get all the client information like so. And I won't go into it, but it's the exact same as the bookings endpoint we saw in the services endpoint. All this is doing is just getting all of the records from the clients table. And we use this just on a simple data grid for the clients page, which we'll see after this generates. And I can still edit things while this is generating. So one of the things I will set up as this continues to generate is I can see on this site navigation, the styling isn't perfect. So this text is white. So I'm going to make this black. And if I put it into preview mode, do these have hover states? Yes, they do. Fantastic. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a link to them because we want it to link to the page. So this will link to that page. In WeWeb, I have access to states. So because I've had this link to something, I can now add an active link. So it will automatically detect when it's on that page. And when it is, I'm just going to give it a one of the colors. Actually, I'll give it a very slight tint. There we go. I'll give it something like that. And how is our component doing? Okay, there's still some things to go. And in the meantime, I'm going to just set up the clients page. And then go back to the dashboard and add a link to that clients page. Give it the same styling as we did before whenever it's active. So as it is generating, if you wanted to, you can obviously see the code it is generating. As I mentioned before, you can fork components. And even when it generates this custom code, you can edit it if you would like. So I won't make any manual edits to this once it is done. But the nice thing about all this is obviously you can edit things inside of the visual editor. But if at any point in time you're feeling technical, you are technical, or you want to just, I don't know, explore the depths of what everything can do, then you can actually access the code editor. So if I go into the component editor here, I have a few different components already in my project that I've generated before. And so from this editor, you can access the code of the component and you can edit it and make all the changes directly from inside the editor. So now this is done. It's just finishing off the build here. Conscious of time, so I don't know if we'll get into generating the bookings page and the clients page because they're both similar. It'll just be data grids, but we'll see how we do for time. And this is just building now. Oh, there we go. So I can set it to active and I can drag it onto my page. And now we can see we have this custom calendar. Very cool. And I would delete this one that it gave us. And the final thing I need to do here for this component that it did give us is bind the data. So here, whenever you generate a component, you have access to everything that we've saw when we're using elements inside of WeWeb. So you have access to properties. You even have access to workflow triggers. So if I was to add a workflow now, we can see we have these custom triggers that it gives us access to that we could set up logic around. And it even gives us access to variables as well. So we can see here, there's these different variables that it automatically gives us access to. So yeah, very cool. We can set up different logic around it. So I will bind my bookings. So I can just go into bookings, find that collection that we have. And as we can see, all of the bookings automatically show here. So if I click onto this, we can see we have these bookings that we've made in the past. Cool, we have all of these. Super. So that is all pretty much set up and we can see the status and the bookings for the day. One thing I will actually change, I won't change it now because it will take time, but if I wanted to, I could simply go back into the AI. And because I have this component passed in as context, I could say, hey, I want to change the width, I want to change the height, because in this case, it'd be nicer to make it slightly smaller so everything fits on the screen without scrolling. And so if I wanted to, I could ask it to make those changes and it would probably actually not only just make the changes directly, it would probably give us like nice properties we could use. So it'd probably give us some kind of slider where we can change this sizing to whatever we want. For the sake of time, I won't do it because it just will mean it has to regenerate the component. So what I'll get onto now is the clients page. So that's all set up. And actually just quickly before we do that, I'm going to just make sure everything still works as we expect it. So on this booking page, I'm going to make one more booking. I'll make it on the 15th at 12 o'clock. That's the 15th at 12 o'clock. We can see we have the information. And now if I just refetch my bookings data, we can see on the 15th, we have that booking at 12 o'clock. So cool, everything is working correctly. So if I now go into the clients page, now we just need a data grid. So I have a simple wireframe set up for this, like so. So I would just take a screenshot as I did before. And again, you don't necessarily need to give it wireframes. It's just nice if you already have some kind of idea of what you actually want the UX of the project to be. And then finally, I will give it this prompt, same as before, just saying, hey, on this page, I would like a clients page with then some general design information. So I haven't given it my my clients collection here as context or anything. So I'm not too sure what it will do for the data grid because obviously it doesn't know what it should bind the data to. But yeah, we'll see what it does. So it's using our multi-page section. So it knows to use that already existing navigation bar. And we shall see what it does for the data grid. Oh, wow. I think it's already automatically bound the collection without me asking. Oh, it has. Okay, very cool. So because in the wireframe, I included the text data grid of all clients, it automatically knew to bind our clients collection. I promise this wasn't planned to be some shock horror fake thing from me. I genuinely didn't expect it to do this. So it's automatically bound our clients collection. Very cool. And so, yeah, I mean, this is pretty much ready to go now. So whenever a new client is created by that booking portal, they'll automatically show here. And just to double check, the client's collection is set to fetch automatically. Yes, I don't want it to preserve on navigation. So now if I switch to the dashboard and then switch back to clients, it fetches the data. And then because that was so quick, I probably actually can just very quickly duplicate this and do it for the bookings. And here, like if I wanted to, I could just do it manually. So I can get the AI to do it, or I can do it manually. I have the best of both worlds. So I will do this. I can just change this to bookings, manage and view all your bookings. I want this text to be left like so. And then I can simply just change the data. We have that. And regenerate the columns. And there we go. We have all our booking data. We created that column I don't really want because it's just unreadable. Super. And it's ready to go pretty much. And the last thing I need to do is set up the booking nav item so that it goes to the booking page. And I will give it an active link state. I can't remember exactly what the color was we gave it, so I'll just copy it from here. Like so. And I think that is one last thing. So right now, all of the pages are public. So the booking confirmation page is public, the booking portal page is public. The reason we can tell it's public is it has this globe icon. So what I can do is I can go into private access for this bookings page. I only want authenticated users to be able to access it. Same for the clients page. And same for this home page. And so I'm going to publish this. And in theory, unless I've missed something, this should all work correctly. So just to check it works in the editor while that's deploying, we have all our data, fetches here. We have all of our bookings in the calendar that come from the bookings made by the portal. We have a data grid of all our bookings, and we have a data grid of all our clients. And if we had more time, we could set up CRUD operations. So for instance, the AI has already automatically given us add new client buttons and edit buttons in the data grid. So we could set up modals for exactly that. So I could create a modal. I could ask the AI to create, some kind of new client form. I could create an endpoint for that in Xano. Likewise with the edit buttons, and then same for the booking CRUD operations. Actually, I need to change that. I missed that. Shouldn't be add new client. Should be add new booking. And so you could set up all the operations you need to and get the AI to help out along the way. This is still deploying. I do want to give it one test in live. While it goes, there we go, super. So I don't think I'm logged in. So in theory, I should actually get, this shouldn't work because I'm not authenticated, and it's an authenticated page. There we go. I don't see anything because I'm not authenticated. Whereas if I go to the sign in page and I access this, I can see something, super. And if I sign in, I'm brought to the dashboard. I have access to the calendar with all of my bookings, which, as I said before, is not the prettiest thing in the world because of the sizing. But if we had more time, we could ask the AI to add different sizing properties. Bookings page works as expected, fetches all the data. And then the clients page, likewise, fetches all of the data. Super. And again, more time, we can make some more styling adjustments. So I forgot to move this client's text to the left, different things like that. But as a base premise, I think we made a pretty good attempt in the space of an hour to get everything set up. So yeah, that's pretty much us. I don't know if there's any questions along the way.
Yeah, that's super, super cool. If anyone has any questions, they can definitely ask those now. I really like how you sort of can traverse between, the AI and the editor. I think, a lot of people wouldn't like it if you were just relying on the AI, but you have this fully built-in, baked-in editor that you can edit any of the components that AI generates, which is super, super nice. Really cool demo. It's incredible what you can build in an hour or less. Just completely in WeWeb here, and it's full stack. You have your database, you have your front end, and everything else. So yeah, super, super cool demo. Thank you so much for putting this all together. Again, what's the best way to get in touch with someone at WeWeb if they have any specific questions or general questions about the platform?
Sure thing. No, thank you for having me. The best way to get in touch is really through any of our socials. So at WeWeb on Twitter, even maybe at WeWeb on LinkedIn, we're pretty active now. And also the community forum. So there's a forum we have. Everyone's pretty active in there. It's the best way to provide feedback. But like I say, you can reach out in any way, shape, or form on our socials, community forum, whatever works best. We'll always try to be as proactive as possible.
Amazing. Well, thank you again. Thank you so much for doing this. It was really helpful. And we appreciate your time.
Pleasure. Thanks very much, guys.
Right. Yeah. Bye.